Hello students, welcome to our online video tutorial class. I think all are you safe in your home, and obviously for the lockdown condition we have to continue our class like this, and I think you have seen the previous videos whatever I have made on the chapter light processes, and I think you have understood each and every part of that chapter also. So here today we are start discussing about the next chapter, that is the control and coordination. In the control and coordination portion, first of all we have to discuss about what is stimuli. We all know stimuli is actually such kind of changes which are happening in the environment against which the various living organisms are responding. So whatever the changes are actually happening in this open environment, those are commonly known as stimuli in plural, and in singular that is stimulus. Whatever the examples can be of the stimulus or stimuli: heat, cold, sound, smell, taste, touch, pressure, gravity, water. There are so many kinds of stimulus present in this environment against which we are providing responses, including plants as well as microscopic organisms also. So always keep it in your mind, these living organisms who are responding against the stimuli, they are always or most of the time responding by moving their body or by their body movements, because without body movement obviously we can't give the response against any kind of stimuli. But it is not always true, this body movement can be found, this is not always true for the plants, because keep it in your mind, in case of plants, in each and every kind of stimuli they are not providing the responses. Whatever the stimuli are accepted by them, or whatever the stimulus they are actually can understand by them, so against those kind of stimuli only they are giving the responses. Every kind of stimuli, against that they are not providing the responses. Now the next point is that what is coordination? Coordination is actually a proper response to a stimulus. Many organs in the body should work together. That means when the multiple organs, multiple systems, multiple tissues, they are actually working together, they are actually collaborating with each other for performing a major function, for making that organism survive. So for that reason obviously there should be a collaboration, there should be a interrelationship present in between the organs, in between the tissues, in between the cells. So that collaboration, that interrelationship in between the organs are commonly or scientifically known as coordination. And obviously coordination is a working together process in between the various organs in an organism to produce a proper response against any kind of stimuli. So obviously if the coordination is not there properly in between the organs, obviously whatever the stimulus we are obtaining, we can't obtain that specific stimulus also, because if the coordination is not there in between organs, obviously the stimuli will not be reaching to our brain, as well as after reaching the brain also whatever the responses we are providing against that stimuli after analyzing it, that is also happening because the coordination is present in between organs. If it is not present there, obviously the responses will not be also provided against any kind of stimuli, or if the responses will be provided also, that responses will not be appropriate according to the stimuli provided. So for that reason obviously coordination is very much necessary. Going for the next point, we all know that in animals control and coordination is done by the nervous system as well as endocrine system. And in case of plants, always keep it in your mind, they don't have any nervous system. So for that reason obviously they have only some plant hormones or chemical substances by which they are commonly coordinating their internal organs. They are trying to give the responses against any kind of stimuli. So we have nervous system and endocrine system, the animals, and in case of plants only plant hormones and phytohormones are functioning like that. That means that only the endocrine system. Now just I am going for the control and coordination, how it is maintained or how it is performed in case of animals, that we will see. First of all, you can see coordination in animals. In animals, control and coordination is commonly done by the nervous system and endocrine system. Already I have told in the previous slide. Keep it in your mind, this nervous system is commonly made up of three portions or three parts. One is brain, second one is spinal cord, and third one is nerves. So obviously these three portions or these three parts are responsible for maintaining the coordination in various organs, various tissues, various systems present in each and every animal's body. First of all, when we will be discussing about the coordination, we have to know about what is receptor. Receptor are those specific structures, mostly it is made up of proteins, and these structures are responsible for obtaining the stimulus from open environment as well as from internal environment of body. So receptors are mostly protein substances, or sometimes it can be the sense organs also, which can receive the stimuli and responsible also for passing the message to the brain or to the spinal cord, because based on the type of stimulus we are sending them to the brain, or sometimes we are not sending them to the brain, we are sending them to the spinal cord also, but entire this function is performed by that specific structure is commonly known as receptor. Here some specific types of receptor has been mentioned. Whatever the types, let's see. First one you can see, that is the photoreceptor. Obviously these kind of receptors are present in eyes to detect the light, because photo means light, and obviously light receiving receptor will be called as photoreceptor. Next, phonoreceptor. Phono means sound, that means this kind of receptors are exclusively responsible for accepting various kind of sounds, and keep it in your mind, these phonoreceptors are exclusively, why they are present in the ear, because ear is actually the auditory organ by which we are generally or commonly obtaining the various kind of stimulus, sound oriented stimulus. So for that reason obviously phonoreceptors will be present inside the ear tract. Olfactory receptor, obviously from the name you can understand, olfactory word has come from the olfaction. So olfaction means obviously this kind of receptors will be present in our nasal cavity, or these receptors are actually present in the nasal epithelial cells, and they are responsible for obtaining various kind of olfaction. Maybe it is good, maybe it is offensive or bad, but olfaction can be obtained by these kind of receptors. Gustatory receptors, what are those receptors? Gustatory receptors are those kind of receptors by which we are getting gustation, that means taste of any food. And obviously tongue is there, that is the fleshy structure present within our mouth, and that is responsible only for detecting the taste. So for that reason gustatory receptors are the taste buds which are present on the surface of tongue, obviously the upper surface of tongue. Tango receptor. Tango receptor means, tango means touch, that means these kind of receptors are exclusively capable of obtaining various kind of touch stimulus. It can be heat, it can be any kind of touch which is related with our skin or which is given on our skin. So obviously these kind of receptors are present on our skin and responsible for obtaining touch stimulus from any kind of resource. So these are the type of receptors. I think we have understood properly. Next, after receptor obviously there is another part, that is effector. Effector means those can be muscles, those can be glands by which we are providing the response against any kind of stimulus, and obviously the responses will be provided by the brain and spinal cord at first, and those responses will be going to the effector organ, because without the effector organ whatever the responses are provided by the brain and spinal cord, obviously it cannot be seen due to movement of the effector organ, due to movement of the target organ, maybe that is muscle or gland. Obviously we will be knowing about the response against the stimulus. Now the point is, there are two type of nerves commonly we know, and those two type of nerves here actually it has been written, that is sensory nerve and motor nerve, because obviously from the receptor to the brain and spinal cord, those type of nerves are actually carrying the stimulus, and they are commonly known as sensory nerves. And keep it in your mind, another kind of nerve is also there present who are carrying the responses from the brain and spinal cord to the effector organ, and those organs or those specific nerves are commonly known as motor nerves. Keep it in your mind, these sensory nerves are connected in one end with the sense organ, in another end with the brain and spinal cord, and motor nerves in one end it is connected with the brain and spinal cord, and another end it is connected with the effector organ, that is muscles and glands. So I think this sensory nerve and motor nerve as well as the receptor, its types as well as effector organ, you have understood all in very clear manner. Now we will be starting the discussion about the next point, that is the control and coordination, specifically in human, because within this we have to discuss about the nervous system as well as the endocrine system, both. So first we are start discussing about the nervous system. First you can see here it is written human nervous system. So let's see what we have to study within human nervous system. Human nervous system, first of all we have to know about their parts. Whatever the parts are present within human nervous system, obviously from the lower classes we know it is composed of two types of nervous system. One is central nervous system, another one is peripheral nervous system. Keep it in your mind, central nervous system is such kind of nervous system which is consisting of brain and spinal cord, because central nervous system is mainly composed of brain, and there is also an accessory part, that is the spinal cord, for supporting various kind of accessory activities. Second part is there, that is the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is the next nervous system through which the responses provided by the central nervous system, it will be just distributed to each and every body part, each and every corner of the body by the help of this peripheral nervous system. Keep it in your mind, these are arising from the brain and spinal nerve, and they are just getting distributed, because cranial nerves, spinal nerves, these all kind of nerves as well as autonomic nervous system, entirely it is coming under the peripheral nervous system, because it is actually distributed throughout our periphery of the body. That's why the name has been given. And central nervous system, why the name is like that? Because it is located centrally within our brain, that's why. So now before entering within the central nervous system or peripheral nervous system, we have to talk about the structure of the neuron. So let's see whatever the structure of the neuron is commonly found. First of all, neuron is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. We all know without neuron, obviously the nervous system cannot be formed, because this structure is only responsible for carrying any kind of information, maybe from the sensory organ to the brain and spinal cord, or maybe the vice versa. Always keep it in your mind, this nerve cell or neuron is composed of three parts. First part is cell body or cyton, second part is axon, and third part is nerve terminal or axon or terminal or synaptic knob. Whatever you want to say, you can say. Out of these three parts, keep it in your mind, the first part, that is the cell body or cyton, that is containing a nucleus as well as the cytoplasmic portion inside it. And keep it in your mind, this cyton is containing various cytoplasmic or protoplasmic processes, and those branchings are commonly known as dendrons first of all, and those dendrons are again further divided into more smaller, more minute branches. Those are commonly known as dendrites. Now the elongated cytoplasmic process from the cell body or cyton, that is commonly known as axon, and axon is commonly covered by a protective covering, and that is known as myelin sheath. Keep it in your mind, this myelin sheath is actually made up of a protein, that is myelin protein. And another more important thing is that in between the myelin sheath, it is actually not continuous sheath, it is rather small gaps are present. It is actually interrupted sheath, and those gaps are commonly known as node of Ranvier. If you go to the ending of the neuron, that is known as nerve terminal or axon terminal or synaptic knob. Keep it in your mind, always the neurons are present in a linear manner. Linear manner means the end of one neuron and the starting of the next neuron, and they are just facing to each other. That means end-to-end connection is there in between the neurons. And in this junctional region where the end-to-end connection can be found, those junctional regions are commonly known as synaptic cleft, and the entire junction or the connection of two neurons, that is known as, the structure is known as synapse. The space or the gap in between two neurons, that is known as synaptic cleft, and the junction or the communication which has been generally produced in between two neurons, that is the ending portion of one neuron and the starting portion of the another neuron, that is commonly known as synapse. Messages can pass through the nerve cell in the form of chemical and electrical signals, because two types of synapse can be found. One is chemical synapse, that means obviously through this synapse the impulse is passing in a form of chemical, or through a chemical, that is neurotransmitter. And another type of also synapse is there, that is electrical synapse, because through this kind of synapse the electrical signals are only passing, it is not passing through any kind of chemical. The dendrites always receive the information and starts a chemical reaction which produce electrical impulse which passes through the axon. Another more important thing is that from one neuron to the next neuron through the synapse or through the synaptic cleft, obviously the impulse or the neuronal impulse can propagate by the help of chemical substance, as well as sometimes it is passing electrically also. But starting from the cell body or cyton, when the stimulus is obtained by the dendrons or dendrites, after that through the entire axonal process, when the nerve impulse is propagating, that is always the electrical impulse propagation procedure, because there is only ionic exchange is happening during this procedure, and for that reason it is always electrical impulse. No such chemical is involved in this nerve impulse propagation through one neuron. So let's see the structure of the neuron, whatever we have discussed. This is the cell body or cyton. You can see there is a nucleus which is present centrally, and it is surrounded by this portion, and that is known as cytoplasm or the matrix of the cell body or cyton. This matrix portion is commonly containing so many types of granules, as well as some fiber-like structures also. Those fibers are, or fibrils-like structures are commonly known as neurofibrils, and those granules, whatever I have told, those granules are commonly known as nasal granules, and these are the protoplasmic or rather cytoplasmic processes. Those are known as dendron, and those are again further branched into dendrites. Now from the cell body or cyton, axon has started, and in the junction of axon and cell body there is a specific joint. This joint I am showing about, this is commonly known as axon hillock. This is axon hillock, that is the junction present in between cell body or cyton and the entire longer cytoplasmic or protoplasmic process, that is the axon. Now the point is, entire axon is covered by some specific protein made sheath, that is commonly known as myelin sheath. In the figure also you can see the myelin sheath is interrupted in a specific interval, and those specific gaps are commonly known as node of Ranvier. There are several neurons which are not having this myelin sheath also. Those are commonly known as non-myelinated neuron, and who are having, they are known as myelinated neuron. Now the point is, this specific myelin sheath is commonly formed from a specific kind of cell that is known as Schwann cells, and these Schwann cells are actually present here just on the periphery of the myelin sheath. And at the last end, if you come, you can see this is the axon terminal or synaptic knob. This is actually the last part from where the nerve impulse can be propagated to the next neuron, and the next neuron is again starting by this structure, and obviously in between these two neurons, whatever the junctional area, that is known as synapse, and the gap is known as synaptic cleft. Okay, so this is the structure of the neuron overall. Now we can see the various types of neurons here. Whatever the various types of neuron, there are three types of neuron we commonly know, or we have also studied in the previous slide. One is sensory neuron, second one is motor neuron, another one is interneuron. What is sensory neuron? Sensory neurons are those kind of neurons which are carrying impulses from the sense organ to the spinal cord as well as in the brain. Mostly in the brain, few times to the spinal cord also. So these neurons are carrying senses or any kind of stimulus, that's why they are commonly known as sensory neuron. Second one, you can see these are the neurons which are carrying the responses starting from brain and spinal cord to the effector organ, that is muscles and glands, and for that reason they are commonly known as motor neurons. Third one, you can see that is commonly known as interneuron, because these neurons are actually connecting the sensory neuron and motor neurons, and this kind of neuron is commonly present within the brain or spinal cord only, because these neurons are only responsible for analyzing the type of stimulus which has come to the brain or spinal cord. Because if this neuron will not analyze the stimulus, obviously whatever the type of response can be given against that stimulus, that cannot be prepared or that cannot be decided. So for that reason, interneuron or internuncial neuron or intermediate neuron, that is very much necessary, and this is commonly present within the brain and spinal cord. This is the main important thing. So see properly the three types of neuron in the next figure. This is the figure. This is the sensory neuron. You can see these are the dendrites of that neuron, which is commonly accepting any kind of stimulus and passing that specific stimulus through the axon, reaching to the cell body, and from the cell body next another axon, and through the nerve terminal it will be just reaching, or it is entering within the interneuron which is present in the brain or within the spinal cord. This neuron is actually functioning as the analyzer, because this is actually analyzing the type of stimulus which has come, and after analyzing the stimulus, what can be the response or what type of response can be given against that stimulus, that can be decided by this interneuron only. This can be also called as internuncial neuron. Again I am repeating, this can be also called as internuncial neuron or relay neuron also. This interneuron, after analyzing the type of stimulus, when it is already prepared its responses, those responses are only given to the cell body of the motor neuron, and from that cell body obviously through the axon and nerve terminal it will be coming to the effector organ. An effector organ, when just it is getting the response, then it will be functioning according to that response. Whether it will move or it will not move, that is strictly depending on the type of response has come to the motor neuron or the axon terminal of the motor neuron. So this is actually the connection in between the three types of neuron, and these three neurons in a coordinated manner, they are actually controlling the entire stimulus response cycle. Okay, I think this entire photograph or entire image you have understood very clearly. Now I am just going for discussing about the transmission of nerve impulse through the synapse. So for discussing about this part, or before starting the discussion about the transmission procedure, we have to know about what is synapse. So let's see what is synapse. Already I have told you, it is a junction that mediates the information transfer from one neuron to the another neuron, or maybe sometimes to another effector cell. That can be muscle or that can be any kind of gland. Secretary it is written. Keep it in your mind, before the synapse, whatever the nerve terminal is present, that is known as presynaptic neuron, conducts impulses towards the synapse, because it is the before synapse this part is present, and after synapse whatever the part is present or the starting portion of the next neuron is present, that is commonly known as postsynaptic neuron, because it is present after synapse and it is present before synapse. And in between them there is a gap, already I have told you, that is commonly known as synaptic cleft, and the entire this junctional area is commonly known as synapse. So let's see the figure so that the entire concept will be getting clear. This is actually the synapse figure. Here this is the presynaptic knob, this is the postsynaptic knob. In between them there is a white region or there is a gap, that is known as synaptic cleft. It is written also. And another more important thing is that in this synaptic cleft, small some globular structures you can see, those are commonly known as the chemical substance, that is neurotransmitter. Because when the nerve impulse is coming to the axon terminal, on that time these neurotransmitters are releasing into the synaptic cleft, and those neurotransmitters are getting connected to the receptors present on the postsynaptic nerve terminal or postsynaptic membrane, and automatically the nerve impulse will be getting propagated. So in an elaborate manner I will be discussing in the next slide, that is the mechanism of synaptic transmission. But I think the synapse structure, presynaptic knob, postsynaptic knob, within the presynaptic knob there are some vesicles or sac-like structures within which the neurotransmitters are present, and in between these two synaptic terminals there is a space that is known as synaptic cleft, where the blue color globular structures are actually present in a scattered manner, and those are commonly known as a neurotransmitter. Keep it in your mind, on the surface of postsynaptic knob there are presence of so many types of receptors for accepting the neurotransmitter as well as for propagating the nerve impulse to the next neuron. So now we will be discussing about the mechanism of synaptic transmission in the next slide. Here you can see this is the mechanism of synaptic transmission. A nerve impulse, that is action potential, obviously nerve impulse is commonly known as action potential, that is traveling down the axon to the axon terminal. This is actually told that when any neuron is accepting or obtaining any kind of nerve impulse by its dendron or dendrite, after that in a form of electrical impulse, that is known as action potential, that impulse is passing through the entire length of the neuron, that means through the axon, and reached to the axon terminal first of all. Then the axon potential opens the calcium ion channels, causing calcium to diffuse into the synaptic knob. Specifically I am saying presynaptic knob, because in the presynaptic nerve terminal, on the surface of it so many calcium ion channels are present, and when the nerve impulse has arrived to the presynaptic knob or axon terminal, on that time those calcium voltage gated ion channels present on the surface of presynaptic knob, those will get open, and just it will get open, automatically the impulses, that is automatically the calcium from the extracellular fluid, it will start coming inside that specific presynaptic knob. Now the calcium influx triggers the release of the neurotransmitter from the synaptic vesicles. That means when the calcium has entered within the presynaptic knob, now keep it in your mind, within the presynaptic knob in the previous figure, that means I am talking about this figure, you have seen already there are so many vesicles or sac-like structures are present. Those are commonly known as synaptic vesicles. So just the calcium 2+ ion will enter within the presynaptic knob, it will just push these synaptic vesicles, whatever just I have shown, towards the peripheral membrane of the presynaptic knob, so that those synaptic vesicles will get fused, and automatically those chemical substances which remain stored within those synaptic vesicles, those are commonly neurotransmitter, those will be getting released. So that is actually happening during this synaptic transmission process. Now just those type of synaptic vesicles are fusing with the presynaptic membrane, automatically what will happen, the neurotransmitters are coming out into the gap or the space which is present in between two neurons, that is commonly known as synaptic cleft, and obviously by the process of exocytosis it is coming out. Here also you can see the synaptic vesicles have ruptured here, and by the exocytosis process neurotransmitter has come out into the synaptic cleft. Now these neurotransmitters diffuse across the synapse and bind to the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. So obviously those neurotransmitter, whatever has been released, those are getting attached with the receptors which are present on the surface of the postsynaptic neuron, okay, or postsynaptic membrane. In this slide also you can see one thing, that is some neurotransmitters are inhibitory as well as they are others are excitatory. That we have to keep it in our mind, because whatever the neurotransmitters are releasing from presynaptic neuron, they can excite the next neuron or sometimes it can inhibit the next neuron also. So always keep it in your mind that postsynaptic cell may be stimulated or it may be inhibited depending on the type of neurotransmitter. That means already it is clear to everyone that whatever the type of neurotransmitter is releasing, maybe it is stimulatory or inhibitory. Based on that, the next neuron will be getting further stimulated or getting inhibited. Okay, so I think the entire process of synaptic transmission, how it is transmitting from the one neuronal terminal to the next neuronal terminal, it is very much clear, I think. So I am just going for the next slide. In the next slide you can see there is a classification of the nervous system. Here we will be discussing about now the classification of nervous system. So let's see. Here you can see mainly the nervous system is classified into two categories. One is central nervous system and another one is peripheral nervous system. This nervous system is exclusively present within the brain as well as present within the spinal cord. So this is actually composed of brain and spinal cord. And peripheral nervous system, that is a type of nervous system which is distributed throughout our entire body peripherally. So peripheral nervous system is exclusively made up of two type of nervous system. One is autonomic nervous system, another one is somatic nervous system. Now the point is, autonomic nervous system can be subdivided into sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, and somatic nervous system can be subdivided into cranial nerves and spinal nerves, because cranial and spinal nerves are actually present under the somatic nervous system, or somatic nervous system is functioning by the help of those type of nerves. So this is entire classification of the human nervous system. Now we will be start discussing about the central nervous system. Next we will be entering within the peripheral nervous system and so on. So first we can see here the discussion about the central nervous system. First, we all know the central nervous system is composed of or consisting of brain and spinal cord. It is always receiving the input from the sensory neuron. We all know it directs the activities of various kind of motor neuron, because whatever the responses should be there against any kind of stimulus, those will be sent towards the effector organ through this, and obviously through the motor neuron. Association neurons are actually present within the brain, within the spinal cord. They are maintaining the homeostasis in the internal environment. Association neuron means I am talking about the internuncial neuron, and those neurons are responsible for maintaining the homeostasis, for maintaining the as well as for deciding the type of response against any kind of stimulus, as well as responsible for analyzing the stimulus which has come through the sensory neuron. So this is entirely about the central nervous system. Next, within the central nervous system, first I am starting with the part that is brain. We all know the brain is the main coordinating center present in the human body, because each and every activity, maybe it is nervous system, maybe it is digestive system, maybe it is excretory system, maybe it is endocrine system, reproductive system, any kind of system, everywhere there is a role of brain, because every activity is controlled by the help of brain. So obviously this is the main coordinating center present within the human body. Now the thing is that brain is also protected by a skull or cranium, that is a hard covering made up of calcium carbonate, and that is called as cranium or skull, and that is mainly covering the entire brain from outside. Keep it in your mind, this brain is commonly covered by the three membranes, and those three membranes are collectively known as meninges, and whatever the names of those three membranes, outer membrane is commonly known as dura mater, next membrane or the middle one is known as arachnoid matter, and inner one is known as pia matter. So outer one is dura matter, that is durable, second one is arachnoid matter, and third one or inner one is the pia matter. Keep it in your mind, in between these membranes fluid is present, and that fluid is responsible for protecting the brain from shocks, and that fluid name is cerebrospinal fluid. Now there is a point that the brain has three main parts. They are forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So these are the three portions present in the brain, covered by meninges, and entire the brain structure is kept within a skull or cranium, that is a calcium carbonate covering. And keep it in your mind, there are three layers within the meninges, and in between these three layers obviously the cerebrospinal fluid is present for shock absorbing. Parts of brain, first of all, we all know there are three parts of the brain. In the previous slide only we have seen forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So let's see whatever the type of brain and whatever the functions and whatever the parts. Forebrain is consisting of the cerebrum and olfactory lobe. Specifically, forebrain is divided into two parts. One is telencephalon, another one is diencephalon. Again I am repeating, if you want to write, you can write it. Forebrain is subdivided into two parts, telencephalon, diencephalon. Telencephalon is made up of cerebrum and olfactory lobe, and diencephalon is made up of thalamus and hypothalamus. Okay, so here mainly cerebrum and olfactory lobe it is written because these are the parts within the part that is telencephalon. There is next part also present, that is diencephalon. Within that, thalamus, hypothalamus both are present. Now the function. It controls touch, smell, hearing, taste, sight, mental activities like thinking, learning, memory and emotion. In this slide actually we are discussing it in very short manner. In the next slide we will be discussing the functions of forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain according to each and every part. Next part you can see midbrain. Obviously it is controlling the involuntary actions and reflex movements of head, neck and eye. So these are the body parts whose involuntary activities as well as reflex movements are controlled by the help of midbrain. Next, hindbrain. Hindbrain is composed of three parts: cerebellum, pons varolii or pons, and medulla oblongata or medulla. Keep it in your mind, cerebellum is responsible for controlling the body movement, balance and posture. Again we have to discuss the function separately in the next slide. And pons is there for controlling the respiration. Medulla oblongata function is not mentioned here, it will be mentioned in the next slide. So I think overall the basic functions of each and every part of the brain, forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, it is very much clear to each and everyone. Now we will see the figure where we can see properly these parts of forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. This is the entire brain structure. You can say this is the forebrain, which is composed of cerebrum, already I have told, thalamus and hypothalamus, just I was saying, and another part, olfactory lobe. It cannot be shown from outside because it is present actually inside, that's why it cannot be shown. This entire part is commonly known as cerebral cortex because it is the cortical portion of the cerebrum that is the largest portion of the brain. Next you can see there is a presence of midbrain. Midbrain is this red colored portion, midbrain. There are also two parts. Keep it in your mind, after midbrain there is a presence of hindbrain. Hindbrain is made up of these three portions. These three portions or these three parts are under hindbrain. First one is pons, this purple colored part, which is responsible or which is controlling the respiration. Already we have seen in the previous slide. Next, this is the medulla oblongata. This is the stem. This stem like structure, brain stem, is known as medulla oblongata. And cerebellum, this is the lower next portion, blue color, this is known as cerebellum, that is responsible for maintaining the body posture. And another more important thing is that this is the thalamus, you can see in the figure, and this is the hypothalamus. And keep it in your mind, from hypothalamus the gland, one gland is hanging, that is known as pituitary gland, that is commonly known as master gland, and hypothalamus is responsible for controlling this pituitary gland, that's why it is known as master of master gland. So this is overall the forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain area of entire brain. Elaborately again I am saying that in the next slide just we will be discussing about the function of each and every part. So let's see the next slide. Here you can see forebrain parts with their functions. Actually I have told you that there are actually four parts within the forebrain portion. One is cerebrum, next one is olfactory lobe, and third part is diencephalon. Diencephalon, within that thalamus and hypothalamus, these two are present. Keep it in your mind, this cerebrum portion is exclusively thinking part of the brain. It is also containing various kind of association areas because various kind of sensory and motor neurons are connected in the cerebrum region, as well as the cerebrum functions in the previous slide. Here we have already seen it is responsible for controlling the touch, smell, hearing, taste, sight, mental activity, thinking, learning, memory, emotion, everything. So these will be coming under the cerebrum. Cerebrum is divided into cerebral hemisphere. One is right hemisphere, another one is left hemisphere. Keep it in your mind, cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres. One is right hemisphere and left hemisphere. Keep it in your mind, these two hemispheres are connected by a small connective which is known as corpus callosum. Again I am repeating, it is not written here, you can note it down that both of the cerebral hemisphere, right and left hemispheres, are separated from each other, as well as they are connected also by the help of a fiber that is known as corpus callosum. And these cerebral hemispheres are there present for maintaining the intelligence, for voluntary actions, several things. Now if we will go for the olfactory lobe, obviously olfactory lobe is containing two parts, one is olfactory bulb, another one is olfactory stalk, and this olfactory bulb and olfactory stalk, which is making the olfactory lobe, this is actually responsible for olfaction, but because whatever the type of olfactory stimulus is taken by our nostril or nasal cavity, that is sending the stimulus to the brain, and specifically olfactory lobe, because this is actually analyzing the type of smelling stimulus, okay, and after that this part is only giving the response against that specific stimulus. Third part, or rather the second part, you can say, that is the diencephalon, because first part is actually telencephalon, within which the cerebrum and olfactory lobe, these two are coming, already I have told. Next part is the diencephalon. Within diencephalon there are again two parts, thalamus, hypothalamus. Keep it in your mind, they are responsible for maintaining hunger, thirst, as well as hypothalamus especially it is responsible for controlling our body temperature, that means they are responsible for thermoregulation, as well as hypothalamus is also called as master of master gland, because that is also controlling the secretion of the pituitary gland. So overall, in gist, whatever we have seen in this slide, forebrain is made up of two parts, one is telencephalon, another one is diencephalon. Telencephalon is the part which is made up of two portions, one is cerebrum, another one is olfactory lobe. Cerebrum is actually the largest portion of the forebrain, and this cerebrum is responsible for performing various functions, whatever I have discussed in the previous slide. I am not discussing those points again. But cerebrum, keep it in your mind, it is subdivided into two hemispheres, those are known as cerebral hemispheres, or two parts. Cerebral hemispheres are right hemisphere and left hemisphere. Another more important thing is that these two hemispheres are connected with each other by the help of corpus callosum, that is the important connective. And if you go for the diencephalon is made up of two parts, that is not written here, that is thalamus and hypothalamus. These two parts are exclusively responsible for maintaining hunger, for maintaining thirst also, as well as hypothalamus is responsible for maintaining our body temperature, as well as controlling the secretion of the pituitary gland, because that is known as master of master gland. Here one more thing I want to add, that is specifically this specific cerebrum portion is made up of few of the parts or lobes, and those lobes are frontal lobe, next parietal lobe, next temporal lobe, and fourth, that is occipital lobe. You can see here in this slide about the lobes of the brain, that means the lobes of the cerebrum. I have told you there are actually four lobes are present in the cerebrum region. First one, that is frontal, second one, that is the parietal, third one, that is the occipital, and fourth one, temporal. Frontal one is the first lobe, this one is exclusively responsible for thinking, for maintaining our personality, any kind of planning, as well as other several kind of activities of the cerebrum is performed by the frontal lobe. Keep it in your mind, the next lobe is parietal lobe. This is the portion where actually the analysis of any kind of stimulus and those things are actually going on. Next lobe is the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe is actually this specific portion, and this temporal lobe is exclusively responsible for hearing. Whatever the type of hearing stimulus is coming, those are actually understood by this specific area, as well as response will be given by this specific lobe. There is another lobe also, that is the fourth lobe, and the fourth lobe is commonly known as occipital lobe, and we all know that occipital lobe is exclusively responsible for maintaining our body posture, as well as when we are moving, on that time our body balance also can be maintained by this help of occipital lobe. So these are the lobes which are present within the portion, that is the cerebrum, as well as there is occasionally one lobe is present, that is known as insula, that can be considered as a fifth lobe. So keep it in your mind, there is occasionally one lobe present, that is known as insula, that can be considered as a fifth lobe. But commonly this insula we are not incorporating within the number of lobes. We are saying four type of lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. Okay. So this is the figure you can see here, and in the previous slide, in this slide I have discussed about the diencephalon. So diencephalon elaborately I am just discussing in this slide. Diencephalon is made up of thalamus and hypothalamus. Already I have told, thalamus is the main input center for sensory information going to the cerebrum. I think you have understood, this is the main input center for sensory information which is going to the cerebrum. That means any kind of sensory information which is going to the brain, that has to come to the thalamus first, then it will go. Thalamus, you can see in the figure also, it receives the input from cerebrum to the regulate emotion and arousal. That means it is also responsible for regulating emotional things as well as arousal also. There is another part, or the lower part of the thalamus, that is commonly known as hypothalamus. You can see here, it is a source of posterior pituitary hormones because it is controlling the pituitary secretions. That's why it is known as master of master glands, as well as that act on the anterior pituitary also. Not only the posterior pituitary is controlled by the hypothalamus, anterior pituitary is also get controlled. It is regulating the body temperature, it is regulating thirst, it is regulating the survival mechanism, basic survival mechanism. So it also plays a role in the sexual responses and mating behaviors, fight or flight response, as well as pleasure. So these all things are getting controlled by the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus is present at the floor of the thalamus. There is one more part is present, epithalamus, that is the upper part of the thalamus, but there is no such special function has to be discussed in this slide. So main two functions or main two parts, thalamus and hypothalamus, their functions are written in this slide very clearly. So I think you have understood this specific slide, that is the cerebrum and olfactory lobe, their functions. Within cerebrum there are two hemispheres, cerebral hemispheres, how they are connected by the corpus callosum, and lobes of cerebrum. Lobes of cerebrum we have discussed in this specific slide. Next we have discussed about the diencephalon. Diencephalon function, it is written here very shortly, but diencephalon in a elaborate manner, thalamus, hypothalamus, this part has been discussed in this specific slide. Next is that midbrain. Midbrain is that it is a part, middle portion of the brain, that is just present below the cerebrum, and it is responsible for controlling the reflex movements of the neck, head and trunk, and it is also in response to the visual and auditory stimuli. So in case of visual and auditory stimuli, it is providing against that reflex movements, and that is provided by the neck, head and trunk. Okay, it is also controlling the reflex movements of the eye muscles, changes in the pupil size, as well as changing the shapes of the eyelids. So midbrain is functioning these all activities. It is controlling reflex movements of the neck, head and trunk in response to the visual and auditory stimuli, as well as it is controlling the reflex movements of the eye muscle, changes the pupil size and shape of the eyelids. Midbrain, it is made up of two parts, one is cerebral peduncle, another one is crura cerebri or corpora quadrigemina. Keep it in your mind, this is made up of two parts, cerebral peduncle, and second part is crura cerebri or corpora quadrigemina. Function already of these two parts already mentioned here. Midbrain is also known as mesencephalon. One thing I have not told previously, forebrain, whatever we have discussed, forebrain is commonly known as prosencephalon and midbrain is known as mesencephalon. After midbrain there is next part, that is the hindbrain. Hindbrain is composed of these three parts, one is cerebellum, second one is pons and third one is medulla oblongata. You can see here the cerebellum is maintaining the posture and balance of the body, already I have told, and it is enabling us to make the precise and accurate movement. Okay, when we are actually moving, that will be precise movement and accurate movement, and that is controlled by the cerebellum portion only. Second part is pons or pons varoli. Pons or pons varoli is regulating our respiratory mechanism. It is also carrying the relay information between the cerebellum and cerebrum. That means the forebrain and hindbrain is connected by the help of this structure, that is pons, and it is responsible for relaying the information from the forebrain to the hindbrain. Next and last part of the hindbrain, that is commonly known as medulla or medulla oblongata. It is controlling the involuntary actions such as breathing, etc. Breathing, controlling center for reflex activities such as swallowing, coughing, vomiting. These all kind of activities are controlled by the help of medulla oblongata. It can be also called as brain stem. And one more thing here I want to add, that is hindbrain is biologically known as rhombencephalon. Hindbrain is biologically known as rhombencephalon. So forebrain, that is prosencephalon, midbrain, that is mesencephalon, and hindbrain, that is rhombencephalon. And these are the three portions with their functions. I think hindbrain portion there is no query. You have understood properly this specific hindbrain portion. One more point here I will be discussing in the next slide, that is after the brain obviously there is another portion, that is spinal cord. But before going to the spinal cord, see the structure of the brain very clearly. This is the thalamus, this is the hypothalamus portion. There is one more portion that is called as hippocampus. You can see here that is maintaining the limbic system, and this limbic system is exclusively related with our emotions. Our emotional backgrounds are only dependent on this specific portion, hippocampus or limbic system. Next, there is a pituitary gland that is controlled by the hypothalamus. Then you can see the brainstem, which is composed of pons, medulla oblongata, that is the hindbrain part, and midbrain part. This is the entire blue portion, that is the spinal cord. This is the green colored part, that is the cerebellum, that is the portion of the hindbrain. This is the entire cerebral cortex portion, and this is the pink colored portion that is known as corpus callosum. I have told you already, this is the connective present in between the right and left cerebral hemisphere. So this is overall the structure of the brain, that is containing forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain portions have been mentioned here. Now I am just going for the next slide. I was just discussing about the spinal cord. What is that? So you can see here the spinal cord. The spinal cord starts from the brain and extends through the vertebral column. Keep it in your mind, up to the lumbar vertebra. It has 31 pairs of spinal nerves which are projected towards both sides, and obviously these nerves are present, they are actually distributed from the back side to the each and every part, or towards the front part of our body. It carries messages to and from the brain. That means it is carrying messages to the brain, as well as from the brain also it is carrying. It also controls the reflex action. That means the reflex activities which are not in our control, those are also controlled by the spinal cord. So any kind of reflex action responses we have to give, that obviously provided by the spinal cord. And as well as in case of reflex action, any kind of stimulus also, it is coming to the spinal cord. It is not going to the brain directly. It is coming to the spinal cord, and from there the analysis of the stimulus will be done, and the response also it will be given by the spinal cord as well as by their spinal nerves. Now I am just entering within the next portion, that is the reflex action. Let's see what is reflex action. Reflex action is a sudden, unconscious and involuntary response of the effectors of a stimulus. So obviously reflex action will be a sudden, unconscious, involuntary response against any kind of stimulus, and that is also done by the effector organ, that is known as reflex action. Always keep it in your mind, reflex action is a such kind of action which is unexperienced action, because from previous time no experience is gathered in our brain. There is no experience. For the first time we are just facing this kind of stimulus, reflex action stimulus, and against that automatically we are giving the responses. Okay, example is given, that is we suddenly withdraw our hand if we suddenly touch a hot object. In this reflex action, the nerves present in the skin, that is the receptors, detect the heat and passes the message through the sensory nerves to the spinal cord. Then the information passes through the motor neuron to the muscles or effector organ of the hand, and we will withdraw our hand. So this is the entire example of one reflex action when we are touching any hot object. You can see this entire example in this figure also. Suppose this is the hot object, one candle burning, and just you are touching, automatically what is happening through the afferent or sensory neuron, that means the green neuron, it is just going to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord there is red color interneuron is present. It is just analyzing the type of stimulus, and after that against the stimulus it is determining the response also. Then through the blue color neuron, that is efferent neuron or motor neuron, that response is coming to the biceps muscle. Just it is coming to the biceps muscle, it will just contract, and automatically we will withdraw our hand from the hot object. So this is just the example of touching the hot object and withdrawal of our hand by the help of or by the process of reflex action. Next, in the slide you can see the pathway of the reflex action very clearly. Suppose this is the receptor. From the receptor the stimulus is obtained through the sensory neuron, it is coming to the spinal cord. After there is a presence of interneuron or internuntial neuron. This neuron is responsible for analyzing that specific stimulus and for determining the response. After that it will just giving the response into the motor neuron, and through the motor neuron the response will be going to the effector organ, maybe that is muscle or any other body part, and by movement of that effector organ we are giving the response. So this is entirely the pathway of reflex action. Now about this pathway only we will be discussing in the next slide, and that is reflex arc. What is the reflex arc? The pathway of a reflex action is called as reflex arc. That means this reflex stimulus and reflex response is passing through which pathway, that is commonly known as reflex arc. So let's see what is reflex arc. In a reflex arc, the stimulus is received by the receptor and it passes through the sensory nerve to the spinal cord. Already I have told you, from the spinal cord the information passes through the motor nerves to the effector, that is muscle and gland, for giving the responses. So this is overall the reflex arc. Already I have discussed in the previous slide, and this is the structure, or rather the structure of the reflex arc pathway. This is the stimulus which is taken by the receptor, from where through the sensory neuron it is going to the interspinal cord. Within that the interneuron is present, and interneuron is just analyzing that specific type of stimulus, and after that response will be decided by them, and from here through the motor neuron it is coming to the effector organ, and from the effector organ the response will be going just outside. So this is overall the reflex arc pathway. Now after reflex arc pathway, one more thing I am just want to share with you, that is the structure of the spinal cord. This is the sectional view of the spinal cord. From this figure it will be getting very much clear to you. First of all, keep it in your mind, there are two portions, one is grey matter and white matter, present also in the brain. So here the grey matter portion is this butterfly shaped portion, that is pink color, and this portion is commonly known as white matter. This yellow color portion is known as white color. Okay, now another portion is there in case of this specific spinal cord. This portion is known as dorsal root ganglia, and this portion is commonly known as ventral root ganglia. This is the dorsal root ganglia through which the sensory neuron enters within spinal cord, and this is the ventral root ganglia through which the motor neuron is coming out. And another one thing, that in case of the spinal cord, these two portions are commonly known as dorsal horn, and these two portions are commonly known as ventral horn. So this is entirely the structure. This same structure will be seen in the left hand side of the spinal cord also, because this is a sectional view. In the right hand side, whatever the structure it can be visible, in the left hand side also that same structure will be visible. Only again I am repeating, whatever the parts, this is the entire part which is known as grey matter, this is the white matter, this is the dorsal root ganglia portion through which the sensory neuron enters, this is the ventral root ganglia portion through which the motor neuron releases. Next portion is that these two portions are known as dorsal horn, and these two portions are commonly known as ventral horn. And one more structure is present here, centrally located portion. The centrally located tunnel is commonly known as central canal, and this specific spinal cord is passing through a lumen present within the vertebral column, and that is known as neural canal. Again I am repeating, within the vertebral column there is a lumen that is known as neural canal, and through the neural canal this entire spinal cord is passing through. And within this spinal cord, in the middle, obviously in this portion there should be an aperture. In this figure it is not shown, and where actually this arrow is coming, there should be a small aperture, and that is known as central canal. Keep it in your mind, within this central canal which is present, there is a fluid that is known as cerebrospinal fluid. So cerebrospinal fluid will be present in this specific aperture that is known as, or through this tube that is known as central canal. So I think this entire structure of the spinal cord you have understood properly. Now we are just moving for the next part discussion. Next part discussion is that peripheral nervous system. So in the peripheral nervous system, first of all we can see the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is the motor neurons also form the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary responses by influencing organs, glands and smooth muscle. Keep it in your mind, the first part within the peripheral nervous system, that is autonomic nervous system. Autonomic means you can understand that autonomic nervous system is such kind of nervous system which is present under its own control, because it is of such kind of involuntary responses will be provided by this autonomic nervous system, and obviously it is influencing our organs, glands as well as smooth muscles. Keep it in your mind, autonomic nervous system is composed of two type of nervous system. One is sympathetic nervous system, another one is parasympathetic nervous system. So let's see. Both of these systems function automatically, innervate all kind of internal organs, utilize two neurons and one ganglion for each impulse. Keep it in your mind, this system functions automatically, innervate all internal organs, because all internal organs, they can be under autonomic nervous system. It is utilizing 2 neurons and 1 ganglion, because from one ganglion the 2 neurons are getting distributed. So let's see whatever the types of what is actually the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, you can see in the left hand side. In the sympathetic nervous system is such kind of nervous system which is supporting our body during any kind of emergency condition or fight or flight condition, because when any kind of emergency condition is arriving in our life, we are either getting frightened or we are getting more dangerous, or we are getting actually prepared for fighting with that that specific type of emergency condition. So actually, if we will be getting frightened also, or if we will be start fighting against that specific type of emergency condition, in every condition the sympathetic nervous system is only supporting. How it is supporting? By making some changes in our body. The sympathetic nervous system is supporting in our body in the emergency condition. So let's see whatever the changes it can make. Obviously it can dilate the pupils, it can inhibit the salivation or saliva secretion, it can relaxes our bronchial muscles present within the primary secondary bronchi, it can accelerate the heartbeat also, it can inhibit the peristalsis process as well as the secretion from that specific gastric juice secretion within the stomach. It can stimulate the glucose production from within the liver, because within the liver the glucose is stored in a form of glycogen. So that glycogen will be broken down into glucose, and by using that glucose we can further perform any activity, because if we will be getting frightened by seeing the emergency condition or by seeing anything, we have to run from that location. So obviously glucose is needed for that running, because energy we need. Secretion of the adrenaline and noradrenaline is also controlled by the sympathetic nervous system, because mostly this sympathetic nervous system is releasing this adrenaline and noradrenaline, that is epinephrine and norepinephrine, because these 2 hormones are actually supporting our body during this emergency condition, when we are getting anxious about anything, when we are getting frightened about anything. It is also inhibiting the bladder contraction, and it is also stimulates the orgasm also. So these are the changes which can happen in case of sympathetic nervous system, or by the help of sympathetic nervous system. That means when we are present in an emergency condition, when we are getting either frightened or we are start fighting against that specific condition. And another system is there, parasympathetic nervous system. This is such kind of nervous system which is helping our body to return it to the normal condition from that emergency condition, because after getting over the emergency condition, obviously we have to return to our normal condition. Each and every body system, respiratory process, everything has to come to a normal condition. So for that case, obviously parasympathetic nervous system is supporting our body. So how it is supporting, let's see. It is constricting the pupil. Here the pupil dilation has happened, so it is actually constricting our pupil. Next, it is stimulating the saliva flow. So it has inhibited saliva flow. Obviously it will be opposite. The stimulate saliva flow, that means again the saliva secretion it will start. It will constrict the bronchi. Here it was get relaxed. Here it will be getting constricted. Here the heartbeat rate was increased because we were in the frightened condition. So here the heartbeat rate again slow down to its normal condition. How we are commonly respiring, or how commonly our heart is beating, 70 to 72 times per minute. Next, stimulates the peristalsis process, because peristalsis process was get inhibited, as well as secretion from the gas from the stomach, small intestine, all has got stopped. So those things again started, and here the glycogen which was stored inside the liver, that was start breaking down into glucose, so that you can utilize some energy by that glucose. But here again the bile release it will start, and those specific glucose again will be stored within the liver in a form of glycogen, because glucose will not be utilized more. Next, it will contract the bladder, because here it was inhibiting the bladder, so here it will be again contracting. Initially it was stimulating the orgasm when it was under the sympathetic nervous system. Here you can see it will not be stimulating, rather inhibiting the orgasm. That means whatever the activities you can see under the sympathetic nervous system, the same activities you can see, but only the opposite you can see in the parasympathetic, because whatever the systems, whatever the activities have occurred when we are in emergency condition, that means obviously when we try to come back to our normal condition, obviously those activities will be get reversed. So obviously that you can see here. Okay, keep one more thing here. In the sympathetic nervous system, both of the hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline, which are releasing from the adrenal gland or suprarenal gland, those are actually functioning, because those are actually releasing, and for that reason we are getting the support. If those hormones will not be releasing proper quantity or proper amount, obviously we will not be getting support in that specific emergency condition. And if we will not be getting support, automatically we will be getting faint. In case of few of the people, it is found that when they will get frightened, they will be getting faint. That means they have the problem in adrenaline and noradrenaline. Okay. And we are commonly using this word when we are present in any tension or anxiety. We can say that that is adrenaline rush in our body. So we have understood, I think, this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Now we are just going for the next nervous system, that is the somatic nervous system. What is somatic nervous system? This is a such kind of nervous system which is actually distributed in our body, and it is obviously distributed from our brain as well as from the spinal cord, because the spinal nerve as well as the cranial nerves all are involved within this nervous system. Spinal nerves are distributed from the spinal cord to each and every part of the body, and those spinal nerves can be sensory as well as can be motor, both kinds. And keep it in your mind, whatever the cranial nerves are present within the somatic nervous system, those are only restricted within the cranium or head. That means that any kind of movement of any organ present within the head region or brain region, those will be controlled by the help of this cranial nerves. So let's see whatever the spinal nerves are present. Spinal nerves are exclusively, these are type, all are the mixed type of neuron. Mixed type means they are containing sensory as well as motor neuron. 31 pairs of spinal nerves are present according to the name of vertebrae present in the vertebral column. This specific type of spinal nerve names we have given. So let's see whatever the type of spinal nerve. We can see first one, that is a cervical vertebrae, and they are the nerves which are present. Those are known as cervical spinal nerves, and those are 8 in number. Total cervical vertebrae was 7. Number of nerve was 8, C1 to C8. After cervical there is 12 cervical thoracic vertebrae, and in case of 12 thoracic vertebrae, obviously 12 thoracic spinal nerve is present. After cervical and thoracic, then there is presence of lumbar vertebrae. Keep it in your mind, in this lumbar vertebrae, 5 lumbar vertebrae are present, and from there 5 lumbar spinal nerves have arisen, L1 to L5, and thoracic nerves have come numbered T1 to T12. After lumbar there is sacral region. Sacral region, actually 5 vertebrae are present, but they are fused into one, but the nerves are actually coming from here. There are 5 nerves, sacral spinal nerves. And next there is a coccygeal coccygeal vertebra and coccyx, and that is commonly made up of 4 small vertebrae, and those are united with each other to form one single vertebrae. And keep it in your mind, from here also one coccygeal nerve arising. So these are the spinal nerve, 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Okay, but keep it in your mind, vertebrae was 26 only, because here it is 7 and plus 12 19 and 5 24, here it is 1 and here it is 1, total 26. Cervical vertebrae 26, but spinal cervical nerve 31 pairs. Next you can see the cranial nerve, and their names are written also. Cranial nerves 1 to 12 pairs are there, and see the names in a very sequence manner. The sequence is olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, spinal accessory, hypoglossal. I am just saying its function, each and every nerve function very small in very shortly. Olfactory nerve, we know it is responsible for obtaining the stimulus and as well as for giving response. Optic nerve is responsible for getting the stimulus, that is visual stimulus, as well as responsible for giving response. Oculomotor is responsible for moving the eye muscle so that our eyeball can rotate. Trochlear is responsible also for movement of the eye muscles. This is also responsible for eye movement. Trigeminal is also same. Abducens and facial, these are actually present in the facial region. That means the facial muscles, facial portions, their movement is controlled by the abducens and facial. Next there is 8 number, that is vestibulocochlear or auditory, because vestibule and cochlea, you all know these portions are present within the ear. So auditory nerve they can be told, because these are responsible for obtaining the auditory stimulus as well as responsible for giving the response. Glossopharyngeal, that means this is present in the tongue region as well as in the pharynx region. And vagus is the nerve which is distributed in entire digestive system. So digestive activities are controlled by this specific neuron, that is vagus neuron. That is the 10th neuron, that is the most important cranial nerve also. Spinal accessory, that means this is a specific type of nerve which is associated with our spinal cord. It is distributed there. And hypoglossal. Hypoglossal is a such kind of cranial nerve which is present below the tongue, and from there the stimulus as well as response all are actually controlled by the specific cranial nerve. So these are the 12 pairs of cranial nerves and their activities. So this is overall you have to study. This elaboration is not there so much, but after that also I have told. So I think starting from the first slide to the last slide you have understood all these things whatever I have understood. This lengthy portion whatever I have completed today. So please study this entire portion, each and every slide, study properly, study from your group, and obviously if there is any kind of query will arise in your mind, obviously ask me in WhatsApp as well as you can call me also. And another more important thing is that this specific slide is just getting finishing here. After this we will be discussing about the endocrine system in the human as well as we will be discussing about the coordination in the plant. So in the next video we will be discussing about the endocrine system in animal as well as coordination in plants. So I think the entire slide is very much clear to each and everyone, and you have understood these slides properly, and you have enjoyed this video a lot. So thank you everyone.